Our body changes every single day, and we have to, the most dangerous thing we could do is just go through the motions. We have to really listen to our body. I was in school at the time. I think I was a sophomore or a junior at North Texas. I was playing lead in a lab band. I was playing the jazz chair in a lab band. I was taking 2 trumpet lessons a semester. I was in a couple of different classical ensembles. I was gigging, and I just got to a point where my body had just hit total long-term fatigue failure and just stopped working. But at any rate, I got this horn made for me, and it was great. It was awesome. But over time, I just started to really struggle playing. I started seeing drastic inconsistencies in my playing, where Monday I'd feel like I was on fire, unstoppable. And then by Friday, I could barely play high C. I knew that it was becoming an issue to the point where the Friday feeling was becoming more consistent every day. Alan Versatility told me, and he's like, you've got to slow down. You're not going to be Wayne Bergeron by the end of this degree. A friend of mine told me I was in a season of change where I was so busy cultivating work, right? Because you want to be a name, you want to be a top call, whatever. He's like, you don't need to cultivate. You have more work than you know to do with. You need to curate. You need to figure out what you want to keep and curate. Having a 1.5-year-old at home, he doesn't care if I played with Seth MacFarlane, or get called to play at the Hollywood Bowl, or get offered a chair on Broadway, or whatever. I'm just his dad. Your musicianship has nothing to do with your value as a person. Music has nothing to do with that. I mean, I think I'm a better trumpet player now because of my son than any other time in my life.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today I get to interview another fellow Pennsylvanian, another fellow trumpet player, and somebody that I've had the pleasure of taking a few lessons from over the last 4 or so years. Fun fact of the day with him is we're going to be working together starting the week that my injury occurred. And so it was a lot of things going on at that time, but we reconnected a little while ago, and he reminded me something that I'd forgotten that he had told me a long time ago, was that he had also gone through an injury. And so I told him, let's get you on the show. And he is one of the top call musicians in the DC area. He's the lead trumpet player in the Army Blues Band, and plays with all the other groups out there, as well as being a strong presence online for all things trumpet. And so I'm so grateful to have Josh Kauffman on the show. Welcome, brother.
Thank you so much for having me, Clark. I really appreciate it.
I've really been looking forward to this interview because I think my first interaction with you was during an online masterclass that our mutual professor, Jason Bergman, had you on during the pandemic or something. And you had mentioned...
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
You remember that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you had mentioned this experience that you had with... I didn't know it at the time, but I guess it was an injury, and so if you want to just share that story and how much of it you want to go into.
Yeah, sure. So
your time.
I have, actually have 2 injuries. One was definitely far more serious than the other, but I had 2 pretty serious injuries, serious in the sense of, not career ending for me or anything at that point, but serious in that I think I was really lucky that they happened to me so young, in my 20s. So I was able to learn really quick as to try to find safer and more effective ways to have longevity in my career and my brass playing. The first of which is shorter. I was in school at the time. I think I was a sophomore or a junior at North Texas. I was playing lead in a lab band. I was playing the jazz chair in a lab band. I was taking 2 trumpet lessons a semester. I was in a couple of different classical ensembles. I was gigging throughout DFW. And I just got to a point where my body had just hit total long-term fatigue failure and just stopped working. And, I'm not going to claim to be the greatest trumpet player on earth, but there were certain things I couldn't do that, you could have hacked my legs off and I probably still could play a high C, but I couldn't. I'd wake up and just could barely play an A on top of the staff. And I went to one of my teachers, Rodney Booth, who's a great trumpet player, a great
Yeah.
educator, and somebody who's very aware of how we feel physically when we're playing, and trying to just listen to your body the same way an athlete would. It's a big reason why I'm not a fan of routine. Because the same way like an athlete, you
Oh.
might wake up and these set of muscles don't feel good. Maybe yesterday they did. Well, when I'm warming up, this thing doesn't feel good. That's what I need to pay attention to. Our body changes every single day, and we have to, the most dangerous thing we could do is just go through the motions. We have to really listen to our body. So, in that, basically, what he taught me was I wasn't feeling any sort of fatigue maybe day to day, but eventually, you can drive your car and you're running out of gas, but like eventually it will stop. And that's it. Until you refill it, it's over. And I got to that point where I think I was just stretching myself so thin, and you can pull that rubber band so far and then it just breaks. And so he basically pulled me out of all my ensembles, everything for, I don't remember, it might have been like a week or 2 weeks. I wasn't playing. We didn't do lessons. We just sang and stuff together, and yeah, we just sang and talked through things. And I came back just fine. But sort of what I learned in that was that there's no pride to me, I think, as a brass player by not taking time off. No athlete would work out 7 days a week without taking time off because physically what's going on, especially if you're like, if you're into working out, right, and you wanna build muscle mass, whatever. I mean, physically what you're doing when you're working out is you're breaking down your muscle, and it builds back larger. But in the process of building, it has to rest, and you have to have enough nutrients and everything in your body and be hydrated and all that stuff. I'm not gonna profess to be like a fitness coach or anything, but if you're working out every single day, you're not actually gonna really see much improvement because your body's just is just constantly in a state of being broken down. And so in the same thing with a brass player, you have to take time off. You have to give time for the body to heal, get the lactic acid out of the way and stuff like that. And so I learned that in college. And so um, that was a really big learning experience. Now, fast forward a little bit, right after I graduated North Texas, I won my job with the Army Premier Band, Pershing Zone. I'm in the blues, the jazz ensemble. And I'm not going to give away any names or anything. I don't want to like throw anyone under the bus. But
Sure.
basically, long story short, was that the trumpet company that I had been playing for several years, and I still love, um, was just falling out of favor a little bit. That the trumpet world was starting to go a different direction. And there were certain things about that instrument that didn't work in all the working environment situations I found myself in DC and on the East Coast. On top of that, the person that was a kind of my point of contact there left that company, and it was very difficult to work with them afterwards. So I was kind of in the market for someone else, and I didn't want my name on a poster. I didn't want free trumpets. I just wanted somebody that cared about uh, making a quality instrument and like really I could put a face to the name. Wasn't like a gigantic corporation. Now I'm part of, like, the biggest musical corporation on
Right.
earth being Yamaha, but at the time, I thought, like, "Well, no, I just I'm gonna be like a nobody, and so I just wanna find somebody that's gonna build a good horn." So I found somebody, and I tried an instrument at the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic, and I loved it, it was great. Um, but candy's always good for, like, a day, and then you start eating it, then you gain a lot of weight, right? The bad effects occur later. But within that period of, like, my first year of being in the military, this individual had made me a custom instrument, and everything was cool, but mind you, that previous summer, I'd taken 3 months off the trumpet, didn't play a note, go through Army basic combat training,
Oh,
no
that's right. Yeah.
instruments. You're
Hmm.
just you're just active duty soldier. I lost probably 30 pounds, and with that, I know people that struggle even just losing weight normally, not in basic, just because everything changes. Your face changes, the amount of cushion we have and tissue and collagen in our skin and everything, all that changes. And, so there were all these variables that were going into this, at least at the time, I wasn't thinking about that in hindsight, I I I see now. But at any rate, I got this horn made for me, and it was great, it was awesome. But over time, um, I just started to really struggle playing. I started seeing, like, drastic inconsistencies in my playing where Monday I'd feel like I was on fire, unstoppable, and then by Friday, I could barely play high C. And I knew that it was becoming an issue to the point where that like, the Friday feeling was becoming more consistent every day. And I'm like,
Mm.
"Okay, there's something really going wrong." But I had had so many life changes in a short amount of time, I had no idea where to look. I was incredibly confused. I didn't know if I was getting, like, focal dystonia. I mean, to the point where I was so afraid to tell anybody that I was trying to go to work and do my thing and killing myself every day just to try to make ends to make it happen. And I was, like, terrified of not taking gigs and stuff, right? Because it's kind of a scary thing if somebody thinks you're down for the count. Some people might take advantage of that situation and just say, "Yeah, he's not coming back from this, whatever." I mean, I've seen it happen to friends of mine, like, in LA and stuff, where if they get sick or
Yeah.
injured, some people wanna take advantage of that for their own benefit. And so I'm trying to deal with this kinda privately, and, I'd seeked the advice of some of my former teachers and a really, really good friend of mine here in town, Brian McDonald, who's the lead trumpet player for the Eminent Note. Very, very wise trumpet player, understands all the physical stuff, and Bobby Shue, who is like Trumpet Yoda. Again, I said it before we started this, he's probably the greatest brass educator in the last 100 years at least. Um, so I started isolating the variables is basically what I was told. That was the starting point, is isolating the variables, you know? So I thought, well, maybe it's weight loss, right? Maybe my mouthpiece is just too big. So I started trying to figure out maybe some slightly smaller components and this and that and whatever. And the problem went away. Awesome. Couple weeks or a couple months later, problem comes back. Okay, well, I guess it can't be the mouthpiece. Um, and then I started gaining weight again. Like, okay, I'm back to, like, my old weight. Well, it's not that, still having the playing issues, and I'm, like, doing this back and forth all the time. Am I allergic to silver? I just don't know. At this point, anything was on the table. I go see, like, military neurologists and allergists. Not allergic to metals and stuff. My nerves are fine. I don't have any nerve damage. Like, man, what is going on? I'm isolating all these things, and just one day I had Brian play this horn, and he's like, "Dude, this thing is killing you." Like, "What do you mean, man? I mean, it feels good," and he played it for, like, 30 seconds. He's like, "This will end your career. Stop playing it right now." So, I went home, and because it was the only thing at that point, and there were a lot of other things I had tried, right? This was going on now for maybe over a year and a half of this
Wow.
just constant juggling. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to portray that I feel fine, and I definitely did not. Um, so I went back to my old instrument, which had its issues as to why didn't wanna play it anymore anyways, but I went back to home base, and the problems within a couple months went away, and I stayed on the instrument for, like, another 6 months just to be sure, and the problem never came back, ever. So, through trial and error, through all these hypotheses we had done with various people, I'm like, "Well, that's the only variable I changed where the problem didn't return. It has to be the instrument." So I called up the maker, and this is like 2 years into this now, and I'm like, "Hey, you know, I I I hate to say this, but through all my playing issues and sensations I've been feeling and just injury, I've been really struggling to play and, not doing my best at all. Uh, I have a feeling it might be the horn. It's the only variable I removed that my situation improved." And the first response was from this person was, "Yeah, I kind of figured that horn was gonna be too big in the end." Now that's a whole different story. I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like, I had come to you, I'm used to Gary Radke from GR Mouthpieces, where a lot of times as players, and this is just goes to my point why I'm so passionate about gear. People think I'm just, like, obsessed, but this was really kind of one of the reasons. We as players ultimately always think we know what's best for us, always. I can't tell you how many people I come in here that wanna fight me on what mouthpiece they need to play. But you don't go to the doctor and say, "Hey, doc, I've got gangrene, we gotta hack my leg off," and you just have, like, a scab from your cat. You're not like, you're fine. Take some ibuprofen so it doesn't hurt, and you'll be cool. And so it'd be ridiculous for us to walk into a doctor, no matter how much reading we do on medical books and stuff, and try to self-diagnose ourselves. And in the same way, I was expecting this person who had spent so much time with equipment to try to push me along the right path. I could take my son to the grocery store. He's going to want candy and popsicles. That's not what he needs to survive and be healthy. And so it was that situation where he was like, "Well, you like the sound you were getting, blah, 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 blah." I'm like, "Well, I needed you as an expert to get me the horn that I needed, not what I wanted." And Gary Radke definitely did that with my mouthpieces. And so anyways, we just kinda decided to part ways. And speaking with Gary, Radke, who's a wizard, has helped me, Wayne Bergeron, Eric Biashiro, Dan Fornero. I mean, crazy because he, went to a really severe motorcycle accident and had like total facial reconstruction. So the first person he had to ever fit with a mouthpiece was himself, and then all of
Wow.
us. And so between him, Alan Vizzuti, Bobby Shue, and Brian, I was pretty well set. And, so I kinda started from the ground up. I went to the local music store, and I was like, "Well, the world is run on Bach and Yamaha." And there's all kinds of great horn makers, but as far as sheer volume, the amount of pros I play
Right.
with, everything is either a Bach or Yamaha largely. And I'm like, I want the most boring trumpet. Now is not the time to be inventive." And I ended up on Alan's trumpet, my former teacher. And I was starting to do things on that instrument that I never thought I could have done. And now, of course, I'm a Yamaha artist, and I help them with product development, and they're designing their instruments, and I'm really passionate about making sure people have the right jacket, like a tailor. You can go to Macy's and say, "Oh, I wear a 40 regular," but you go to a tailor, it'll look even that much better when it's really tailored to fit you, and it's not a one size fits all, play a Bach 37 and a 3C or whatever. So after this injury, once I finally kind of dug myself out of the hole and really found out, number one, why that instrument caused that injury. I learned a lot scientifically from Gary and Bobby about why that was happening. But then I also learned about how we can determine through our bodies and through very, very specific, consistent testing, how we can ensure that this is going to sound weird, but how we can ensure that the gear that we're choosing is actually safe for us to play.
Oh,
Not that
absolutely.
something's unsafe, but it's like a runner. If you have shoes that are too small, you could be the greatest runner in the world. You're going to get an injury. Everybody has something that's going to optimally fit them and help them play the best. And so I ended up learning a lot through this as far as, like, again, sort of why my body was breaking down from the horn, and then how to make sure that doesn't happen, what sort of testing and how I can understand what to listen for in a player to ensure that what they're playing does fit them, and that's really helped me be successful helping people pick out Yamaha instruments or different horns or GR mouthpieces definitely as a consultant for Gary. Um, but that injury really set me back, like, 2 years. It Thankfully, it wasn't anything physical, I didn't, like, cut my lip. It wasn't it wa it wa basically, it was just long-term fatigue, and the body just kinda stopped functioning just because it was an overuse injury, basically. I had just overextended my musculature here so much from trying to play, your body just is like, "Nah, we're just not, we're not doing this anymore, we're done." And so, I know I'm glad I came out of it, but it was really serious. I was really lost and really frustrated at the time, so.
Yeah, and I'm glad that. Well, let me rephrase that. It's kind of the first on the show that we're talking about an injury that seems to me to be almost exclusively related to gear choices or gear
Oh,
options, or
what
you know
100%. Yeah,
and
100%.
I mean, for me, like, there's elements of my gear options that I've learned since, that influenced the they didn't necessarily cause the injury. Those that was
Okay.
mostly pedagogical for me, but
Mhm.
it definitely did, like, it exacerbates it, right? And so actually one of the things that Bobby and I talked about when he was on the show was the importance of choosing equipment, especially for like students who are just starting on the instrument, because if they're
Absolutely.
just starting those habits, those playing habits, and they have to do something that is contrary to what their body naturally has the aptitude to do. And I'm
Yeah.
talking, like, from a trumpet standpoint, the obvious perpetrator of that would be like mouthpiece size, or depth, or if the pedagogical principles aren't sound, then the equipment just makes everything worse. I like the
Yeah,
example.
totally.
I like the example that you said of runners, because that's, I mean, I remember cross country friends of mine getting stress fractures because of the shoes that they had, you know, and just
Well, and
running so much.
it's so funny you mentioned that because while I was, going through this injury, I did have another physical injury that I ended up learning a lot as a trumpet player. Joining the Army, you have to take, at the time, it was, Army Physical Fitness Test. Now it's called the Army Combat Fitness Test. But you have to run every 6 months. You gotta run 2 miles as part of this series of events in this test. And I didn't really do a whole lot of that before the military, but I kept getting stress fractures, green stick fractures. I was always injuring myself running. And I was going to physical therapy, and they're like, "Well, do you stretch when you run?" I'm like, "Nah, I don't particularly like running. I just try to get it over with so I can make sure I can pass next week, and that's it." Like, "Well, you have to stretch. You gotta warm up your body." And they're like, "Aren't you a musician? Don't you warm up, you know?" Like, "Yeah, okay." So I start warming up, stretching. I'm still getting these injuries. Back to physical therapy I go. And a physical therapist's like, "You're stretching, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Before and after you run?" Like, I don't do anything when I'm done running. I hate it. It's over, And she's like, "Well, if you don't stretch after you run, your muscles get stiff. They get full of lactic acid. They're not going to respond tomorrow." And I'm like, all of a sudden, she said the word respond, and I was talking about responsiveness, and like this
Right,
light
right.
bulb went off, and I'm like, yeah, stretching before and after, warm up, cool. Just the same way players obsess about warming up, but a lot of guys don't think about cooling down. They play the last note of the gig and they throw their horn in the case. And I always say, you end today with tomorrow's chops. And so making sure that I put myself in a good place at the end of the day can also ensure success tomorrow, no matter how hard I play today. And so, kind of between those two situations that were going on basically at the same time, I walked away. I felt with a wealth of knowledge to be able to not only help myself if this were to happen again in the future, and to make sure how I can kind of be careful to make sure I just have longevity in my career, but also to help other players, my colleagues, students, whatever. Um, at the time, it can be really defeating for all of us, and I'm sure probably you felt that way with your injury. Like, it's over. What am I going to do? I mean, I thought I was just going to get out of the Army and just not play trumpet anymore. But, our successes are built off of our failures. If everything's going well, a lot of times players aren't paying attention. Like, the most natural players in the world sometimes are the worst teachers, or they have the hardest time recovering from stuff like this because they don't even understand the system at all. They have a really well-running car, but they don't know how to change the oil. Well,
There you
if you
go.
go through a issue like this, you're gonna know every part of the engine. And so now, in hindsight, I turned 30 years old this year. I'm incredibly grateful for that experience. It sounds weird to say, but I'm grateful to have gone through that because now I'm very in tune with my body and understand how all of this works, and hopefully I can give my colleagues and peers and friends and students what I learned, and hopefully it can help them, and maybe potentially avoid this situation altogether for them, you know.
Hey guys, just want to interrupt the show real quick and just tell you about something I've been working on for a long time that I'm so excited to share with you. Like I've said in the past, you have the potential to make your injury become a benefit to you, an asset to you. But at the same time, I know the feeling of being lost, not knowing who to turn to, where to go, what resources to use, all sorts of things, and also how to reframe the situation, the mental skills that's needed to be able to do that. And so if you are one of those people looking for that resource, that help, that coaching, I want to tell you about something I've been working on, and that is Musician Unchained. Musician Unchained is now the newest coaching platform for musicians going through injury. It is intended to help you view your situation in a way that benefits you and make the changes in your life that you need to become the best version of yourself because of your injury. Your injury being the impetus for that change. I would love to be able to help you in any way that I can, even if that means sending you somewhere else to someone who can better help you. And so if you are interested in working together one-on-one, visit our website, musicianunchained.com/let's hang for more details. All right, let's get back to the show. Totally. And we could talk about that. I mean, that physical aspect of injury is not talked about enough. That's one of the reasons why we have this show. But honestly, what I feel like this show really is about is the those other factors that go into injury. And I'm curious, our injuries, it seems like your first one, I should say, happened around the same time. And I definitely saw a lot of parallels. I wasn't gigging as much as you were, by no stretch of the imagination. But I do remember feeling like that need and that like just feeling of being stretched too thin.
Mhm.
And we say in the business all the time that you need to be able to wear many different hats as a musician, as a trumpet
Yeah,
player,
for
especially.
sure. Yeah.
And I think that can, at least for me, I recognize that reality caused a lot of anxiety for me, and a lot of like, I have to have my hand in every cookie jar at every moment of the day, or if
Sure.
not, then I'm not going to be able to have a career in this. And that definitely led to some unhealthy mindsets and unhealthy playing habits, some physical, some psychological, or whatever, some thought patterns. And so I'm curious, like looking back on like your life since and your career since that time, how have you? I don't want to use the word balance because nothing's, we're not all going to be balanced in everything, right? Just that's how life is.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
especially for the young cats out there, like how do they integrate that reality that they do need to be um, multifaceted musicians, but also
Mhm.
have a good handle on like the mental progress that needs, like the progress that and the time that it takes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. So, I guess a couple thoughts or a couple different directions off of that. Number one, the good news is we're lifelong students of the instrument, so you don't have to master everything now. I mean, it certainly maybe felt like at one point I had my hand in every cookie jar. I certainly don't now. Um, what I kind of figured out when I was in school, and maybe why I found myself having success in most genres. I was like probably the only student at the school that was covering as much ground as I was with the help of all my teachers. But what I kind of figured out from them was there's sort of two things you need to do, and they're a lot harder said than done. But um, so I'll paint this picture briefly for trumpet, but it's applicable to anybody. But some people say form follows function, or the musical solutions to physical problems, whatever. All that stuff's cool, right? The beauty of what we do is there was no manual when some Egyptian found a ram's horn in the desert. That's the good news. I have a different take on it from my own experience. And that's basically that, if you have a student that's, let's say, working on the Hummel trumpet concerto, it's gonna have its own set of technical problems, whether range, endurance, the trills, tongue, whatever. You go to the Artunian, has a different set of problems, multiple tonguing, saw playing, legato, whatever. You go to the Haydn, now we're dealing with high E flats on B flat, whatever. There's all these things. My argument is, if the same way we learn a language, so as a child, right, we spend a lot of time as a baby, like my son is starting to talk now. He can't read, he can't write. He's purely learning the language from hearing my wife and all the people around him in his life. That's it. And in the same way with music, I think that if we surround ourselves with the music we want to play, that gives us more than enough information to play it. If you're listening on a really intensive level and trying to grow and educate yourself, whether you want to learn how to play mariachi and what the facets of that are, if you see a la Harry James on a page for a toothpaste commercial, you know what made Harry James sound the way Harry James did. Now you combine that with, by the time my son goes to preschool, he still can't read or write, but by then he'll probably, hopefully, be carrying on conversation with me. It's pretty amazing when you think about small kids. They can't read and write, but they totally understand the language. They speak to you like they converse, they can survive, but they can't read or write yet. And then they go to school and they learn all the fundamentals. They learn the 26 letters of the alphabet. They learn how to sound out words, all this stuff, right? And then they learn the back half. So I think it's really important as brass players. For me personally, my students, we pretty much only ever cover technique and facility. Because again, if I have you practicing a specific piece, it has its set of problems and we'll work through it. But then I give you another piece as a totally different set of issues. Whereas if we did technique and facility and I say the trumpet has to be a non-starter. So if we master the trumpet pedagogically, then you could, and you're listening to whatever music you wanna play, you just put those together and you can play anything. It's honestly not much more difficult than that. The thing that I find, though, is that a lot of young students sometimes don't have the willingness to be honest enough to figure out where their shortcomings are on the instrument, and they're afraid to spend time with it, right? When we practice, we wanna sound good. Practicing should be where we spend the most time on, like, the cusp of our ability, where we're gonna meet failure. And those like, that edge of our playing, that's where we wanna work on things so that our growth can go this way. We don't need to spend time in the center, we've already mastered all of that. And so I think if you wanna be one of the most versatile players in the business, and I think you're gonna be more successful if you do that, I think probably you can best spend your time listening to music and, like, really absorbing what it is that we're hearing and trying to identify it through words to yourself or you write it down, whatever. Listening to all these genres and, like, what is it that you notice that makes that like, okay, if I played for you Chet Baker versus Freddie Hubbard, why are they different? Why? Being able to put that into words, and that's where the learning happens. And then if you're playing trumpet in such a way to where you can, again, we're never gonna be experts, we're lifelong students of the music, but if you can get to a point where you've got great range, you can control your articulation, you can play soft, you can play loud, you can play high, you can play low, you can do all these different things, you just put 2 and 2 together, you just put the skills you developed together with the ears that you have, and bam, there you go. It's not much more difficult than that. I think though a lot of students get in their heads and they think it's a lot more difficult than what it is, and it really isn't. It's just usually what happens is if they're not successful doing that, or if there's a certain part of the horn or genre that they're struggling with, there's usually an underlying issue, and it's one of those 2 things. Either there's a trumpet problem, like a brass pedagogy problem that's stopping them from executing whatever it is they want, or they don't quite understand the music deep enough and they can't put it into words and explain like, you can tell they haven't absorbed the music in a really deep way to try to, at this point, replicate it. Um, Now with that, the good news is you don't have to be an expert in everything overnight. There's certainly certain parts of my playing that are better now than they ever were in college when I was purposely trying to practice everything. As you get to a point in your career where I might spend 6 months doing nothing but playing lead trumpet, and then all of a sudden, boom, I get into the orchestra. Well, I'm a all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I start using the tricks I know and everything, but the more and more I do that and do all these find myself in all these different groups, the more comfortable you get. Like, for instance, I started working with, like, a major orchestra, the National Symphony Orchestra, and I had not really done a whole lot of orchestral transposition in college. It got to the point where I was almost embarrassed.
Me neither.
Write I'd have to, like, write the notes in, and all that section would just give me so much hell for it. But luckily, I was good enough at what I did that they knew, like, I was cool. I was a commercial trumpet player. Largely, that's my bread and butter now.
Yeah.
But, I'm sitting with John Williams, and we're celebrating his, 90th birthday, and I'm sitting here with my C trumpet, and I'm reading trumpet nap, and I'm going like 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm like trying to transpose, write the notes in and stuff. I don't do that so much anymore, but I didn't learn that till I was 30. That's one example of a skill that I didn't have in college that I have now, and it's still not perfect. Sometimes I still gotta write stuff in. There's no shame in that. The audience isn't gonna care. You sound good. Who cares? If you can play the trumpet out your ear, go for it. I don't care. Um, and so I think we have to be willing to just be patient with ourselves. Like, if that's your end goal, awesome, that's my end goal too, still is. But I think we have to be willing to just take a step back and find small victories. Like Alan Vizzuti told me in school, because that was kind of my goal, and I developed, pretty bad anxiety, and with that comes depression and all OCD and whatever, like, trying to just be the greatest trumpet player on the face of the earth, and he's like, You've gotta slow down. You're not gonna be Wayne Bergeron by the end of this degree. You're not gonna be Wynton. You're not gonna be me." Like, and so what we would kinda do is we'd kind of had a routine, like, in the sense of, like, make sure you hit articulations every day. Make sure you're touching all these different subjects. But then maybe at the end of the day, you save time to, like, really dedicate it to one little issue you're having. It could be something as small as, in a wide interval, maybe you're clicking the middle note, and we'd talk about how to address that. Well, in the matter of, like, 5 minutes or less, I can fix that problem in a player. And so now you've just got rid of something. And it might seem insignificant, but at the end of the year, let's just say you take days off. Let's just say generally 300 days you played, took 60 some days off. That's still 300 things that you're better at now in 1 year. And again, they might be small, but like ants are small too. But if there's enough of them, they could kill a human being. If you like fall in a pit of a billion ants. I don't know.
That's
Uh,
one of my nightmares. Thanks, Josh.
yeah, yeah, I don't know. Like they could kill you. Like you
Yeah.
watch like the Mummy movies and all those little creatures and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
bugs and stuff. And so when he told me that, a light bulb went off, and I started to become a lot more successful of doing kind of what you're talking about, because I really tried to be patient and just find those daily battles that I could win. And now in the long game, I look at myself in college, and like, man, Josh, you were a horrible trumpet player back then. And I thought I was hot shit, and I didn't realize how much I didn't know and how much I still had to learn. And now, the more you learn, the more you find out, like, I can't even get ahead. My grocery list as a trumpet player is just getting longer and longer and long.
Right.
It's just like, man, I don't know anything. How could I be a professional in my field and I don't feel like I know anything? It's incredibly humbling. Um, but yeah, it's a difficult world we live in now. The expectations, I think, generally for musicians is a lot higher, and I think some of that comes the advent of electronics and the recording technology. There's much less room for error, and honestly, um, there's more excellent workers than there is work available, and so it's really easy. Um, I developed definitely some unhealthy behavioral health, mental health habits because when you're a freelance. Now I've got my day gig, but I freelance all the time, and when you're never guaranteed that kind of job security, it's terrifying. You're constantly You're only as good as your last gig. You're always worried about what people's perceptions are. You're always worried about who might have animosity towards you and try to take your gig, and who, like, whatever, like, it for me as a musician, the probably, honestly, this is a different we don't have to go into this, but honestly, probably the worst injury I've had has been mental, honestly. Something that has sustained me or that has followed me my whole career now, still to this day, is I get really bad anxiety about certain things that the music field has created, particularly as a freelancer, that, you know, I wished I could have told my 18-year-old self. I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town, kinda pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just live life, but
Yep.
I realized through all of this, through the injuries, through now as a professional who's in a healthier place but still have my own battles, to never underestimate mental health. I think as a whole, society is really changing how we view those things, and how widespread certain things occur, especially post-pandemic. And, so I do a lot with behavioral health to make sure I just stay in a healthy place as a person and as a musician, particularly because our field is very difficult. It's hard to explain it to people that aren't musicians. Like, they don't
Right.
our
Totally.
work for it's a very unique thing. We don't have tenure and stuff like that, and as freelancers anyways. And, so the mental health aspect is really important to just make sure you're taking care of yourself. I wish when I was in college I would have kind of addressed some of that when I was going through the first injury, um, to better prepare myself for the future, but hindsight's always 20/20, right? And so
Sure.
here we are.
Yeah, a couple of things from that. I
Yeah,
think that one of the things that has been a big game changer for me. I mean, if I could go back and do this whole thing over, or at least the first part of my college experience over again, is just approach how I viewed my career trajectory just with curiosity, because I think curiosity kind of allows us to be more objective, and
definitely.
it gives us the opportunity to see our limits, our limitations as performers, the things that we need to work on, just very objectively, and just say, okay, this is how it is, right? We're not kidding ourselves. We're not
Yeah,
like looking through rose-colored glasses, but then having the objectivity that comes with knowing that the instrument is just a piece of plumbing, right?
yeah,
And that our growth will happen if we put the work in, and just, well, trusting that, right? And
yeah.
something you said. So I just recently interviewed Jose Johnson, right, from the Trumpet Gurus
Yep.
podcast, and fellow Pennsylvanian, and you had said something with him a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember this, but that your time with the blues band, the Army Blues, has taught you that kind of your worth as a human being has nothing to do with your musicianship.
Yeah,
And
I
so
mean,
I'm
it's
curious if there's a through line between your injuries and what everything that whole journey that you went on, and that coming to that conclusion.
so I'll give you something very personal, and maybe I shouldn't. One of my faults definitely in the workplace is that I'm kind of brutally honest, and I don't mean, but, like, I don't feel like I ever grew out of the honesty stage from, like, a 4-year-old, right?
There you
Like,
go.
my wife already knows to never ask my son how she looks when he's, like, 4 years old, 'cause, little kids be like, "Oh, mom," my niece told my dad he felt, my dad's a big guy. He's tall, like, real stocky, strong, kind of, farm tough,
Yeah.
and he told, she told my niece told my dad he felt, uh, squishy, you know?
There you
I
go.
feel like I do that. I feel like I tell people they look squishy in my own way, but anyways, I'll tell you the God honest truth. So, something that has occurred to me recently in life is that having a 1.5-year-old at home, he doesn't care if I played with Seth MacFarlane or get called to play at the Hollywood Bowl or get offered a chair on Broadway or whatever. I'm just his dad, and he'll probably have more of an impact. I'll have more an impact on his life playing trumpet. I bought him a little plastic blue pea trumpet, and when I play that in the living room, he just goes nuts. That to him, when he's in his old age and I'm long gone, that's what he's gonna remember. He's not gonna care that daddy was a top call of this or that or whatever, and it's stuff I'm proud of, and I'm sure, he'll be proud of that, but
Absolutely.
I remember those kind of moments with my dad or my grandparents, my grandma playing piano. Like, I remember the most private moments I had with them, and becoming a parent, I had to really learn quickly how to balance my musical life and my wife and my son. And what I had learned, I've always had a good marriage. My wife and I have been together for 10 years now. But what I learned is that there was probably a little part of me unintentionally starting to neglect her. Or not just not have those kind of like new relationship butterflies when we were dating because we're married, we're working. I see it as my job, but I was like in the army band, playing 8 shows a week as a civilian, playing Broadway stuff, doing this, doing that, playing with the symphony, traveling. And there were probably a lot of things I missed out on that I kind of regret now. Now, luckily, I learned that, before I was 30. But now having a son, all of a sudden, that's a whole other ballgame becoming a parent. And I had to really learn quickly, like, okay, a friend of mine told me I was in a season of change where I was so busy cultivating work, right? Because you want to be a name, you want to be a top call, whatever.
Right.
He's like, you don't need to cultivate. You have more work than you know to do with. You need to curate. You need to figure out what you want to keep and curate. And so now I'm in a season of curating. I'll always take more work, new things, sure, but there's definitely things that I've let go. So that way I can make sure I'm present for my wife, the mother of my children, my son, and we're gonna have more kids, in the near future. And when I'm on my deathbed, like think about this. I would like Conrad Gazzo for me is probably one of my biggest heroes of all time. And definitely one of the most important trumpet players in our business in the sense of he literally stopped the world if he wasn't available. What other trumpet player can say that? Like if Conrad wasn't available for a session at Capitol, Frank Sinatra would not record. Dean
Oh,
Martin would not record. They would not go into the studio unless Conrad was playing first trumpet. But Conrad passed away in the 60s, and guess what? Those 2 guys kept playing, kept recording. He was replaced. Maybe not replaced, but the job carried on. They
kept
got
going. Yeah.
somebody else
Yeah. Yeah.
played lead trumpet, and so I try to really put myself humbly in my deathbed. Probably by then, I'm not gonna be playing. There's gonna be another lead trumpet player in the Army Blues if the Blues even exists at that point. Um, Whatever gigs I had are gonna be taken over by other people, even if certain contractors make you feel like you're replaceable. You're not. Um, but the people hopefully will be there are my wife and my children. And they're gonna remember me as dad and husband, not as a trumpet player. And through that experience, as a parent, as a husband, getting this job, uh, it's very humbling because we grow up, I spent my whole like childhood and adolescence and college trying to, you know, do this for a living, and here I am. And it's hard. We associate people like I feel like we value certain people based on how good they are. and trying to really realize that your musicianship has nothing to do with your value as a person or what you can contribute or a relationship you can have or a friendship you can have with somebody. Music has nothing to do with that. I mean, kind of I always tell everybody, like, let's just chill out. We're not curing cancer. I'm not saying music's not important, but certainly, like, during the pandemic, we weren't saving lives playing music. Some people don't like that I say that, but it's just the truth. We weren't essential workers, we weren't, we weren't saving anybody. Music has a place, and it's very important in our life, but just very practically, as the world turns, we're not saving anybody physically, as doctors or whatever,
Right.
you know? And so for me, at least, having that kind of or like being in the military band, it's not like we're gonna end wars by the Army Blues playing. Some people get really intense about our role in the military, and man, everyone freak out, like, just calm down. Playing clarinet at the Midwest Band and Orchestra concert is not gonna end the war in Europe, as horrible as that is, and I don't say that jokingly, but, like, understanding what our role is more as ambassadors to the public and public affairs and engagement and stuff, and so through all of that, just realizing, like, okay, uh, music for me now all of a sudden is very different. I'd still identify, like, I love the trumpet more than anybody, I got all this crap behind me, but, knowing that if heaven forbid, I got an injury that was bad enough that I could never play again, I'll be just fine. I'll be the same Josh, I'll be the same exact person whether I'm playing or not. My son isn't gonna see me any differently, my wife's not gonna see me any differently, hopefully my friends won't. I'm not gonna be gigging with them or whatever, but, I feel like we can really humble ourselves by kinda taking a step back and realizing that even though as much as we love it and we might identify with it as our career and our entire being and stuff, it's not. It's not gonna be life ending if we can't play. There is life after music. There's life during the music. There was life before the music. There was a point where we were all alive before we became musicians, and, I learned a lot in my late 20s because I got married kinda young. I became a dad at 29 and got this job at, like, 22, and so I feel like it forced me to grow up, in a sense, a lot quicker than maybe I would have if fate didn't decide kinda where I was at, and so those are kind of the things that I've learned, to try to just keep and bear in mind, as I go through my career, and it's helped me to be balanced, and, one of the reasons I said that to Jose was when I came to DC, one of my trumpet students is, like, retired from the CIA, and he's, like, an
Oh
operative and
yeah, yeah.
whatever, and he's, like, a beginning trumpet player, and I'm like, "Well, this is a smart dude, and he's done a lot of consequential things that I don't know about and shouldn't know about." So, for me to try to discredit him as just dumb because he can't play would be ridiculous. But so often we do that. Sometimes you hear somebody at a band and orchestra clinic, maybe they don't play that great, and you're like, "Ah, that guy's stupid, he sucks." And I don't know, maybe he's like the CEO of like a Fortune 500 company. I don't know. What is it doesn't like the owner of Chick-fil-A or whatever, he's like a trumpet player or something, I think.
Oh,
I
I
think
didn't
it's
know that.
that. One of these like big franchises, the guy is like a trumpet player and like pretty decent too. And so I don't know. You can still be plenty successful and not be that great of a musician, you know. So at
Yeah.
large, I try not to let my music be my entire identity, and I try not to let myself be influenced by others, in what they do and try to see them as, "Oh, they're this, they're that, they're whatever." There's so much more than that. That's a great thing about the Army Blues is because that's the most consistent job I have for sure, being full-time. When we get together, we just do normal stuff. Like, there's a guy in our section that loves they go trumpet section goes rock climbing a lot, and, like, I love to watch movies. We have, like, a movie club in the band. We just do, like, normal people things. We go to work, they're kicking ass, and they're playing at a world-class level, and then we last night, I had, like, a movie hang at my house, and so learning to separate your musicianship and how you identify that way from, like, your being as a person, I feel like can help you, um, live life much healthier than you might otherwise. Because so often we just all identify like, we don't know how to identify. For years and years and years, I didn't know how to identify without a trumpet. I would be very upset, and I would definitely go through, some hardship, but if I could never play again, I would be okay. I know exactly what I would do. I have other passions. I know exactly where I would go if I couldn't play anymore, and I will be fine, you know? And so I think if we can all do that, we'll all treat the music better and treat one another better as well.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. I just wanted to jump in here real quick and tell you about something that I'm really, really excited about. For a while now, I've wanted to create an even more effective resource than just the podcast that injured musicians can go to receive the support that they need. And recently I did just that. So write this down. Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. I know it's a long title. We're still working on that part. But this is a place where people can go now, injured musicians and even musicians who have gone through injury in the past, and people that help musicians go through injury, where they can go to receive the support that they need, whether that be ask questions, share their victories, share their frustrations, and overall just receive the community and the support that they need in a very proactive, intentional way. And so I just ask that you guys support these injured musicians by sharing this group with them, that they can receive the support that they need. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show. Absolutely. I think, I'm so glad you went that deep, because I feel like I don't know how much empirical evidence we have for this yet, because it's a developing field, but I feel like that right there, that identity and the feeling that we have to be constantly in the practice room, or constantly sweating over our craft in order to be successful at it. I mean, you got to put in the work. I remember one of our conversations was actually about that a long time ago. It was like, I was like, Josh, I don't know if I have time all this. And he's like, well, you got to find the time, but at the same time, realizing that it's part of a greater whole. And I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say that you're like kind of investing into this beautiful part of your life with your family and these other interests that you have has informed your career as a musician and as a trumpet artist?
Oh, 1,000%. I think I'm a better trumpet player now because of my son than any other time in my life because of him. It's hard to explain, but sometimes, like, I tell younger players, especially like in the world of jazz and stuff, where we have so much freedom to express ourselves,
Right.
and to get off the page. Sometimes players, that what the questions they're asking, I answer. I say, you just have to live longer. They're like, well, how do you get this thing? And how do you, you just got to live life. You go through some up and down experiences, you're going to play a lot differently. And for me, I treat my jobs differently. I don't work as much. I still work a lot, but I mean, I was killing myself prior to being a parent. But now I have found so much joy in I'm dressed, ready to walk out the door for another job tonight, um, that I can't wait to go to. And I found new joy in seeing people in the work that I did keep and am still doing. Whereas before, I was just trying to have total world domination, that I ended up hating every gig because I was just constantly tired and just worn out and didn't want to do it. But well, if I say no to this person, they might never call me again. And what if they hear another trumpet player they really like? And all these crazy things that we all think, whether people admit it or not, we
Yeah.
all think that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
stuff. And we have
Guilty
to just,
as charged.
yeah, we have to be secure enough in ourselves to just not think those things. And the only thing on earth that would have stopped me from doing that was becoming a parent. That's the only thing. And now being a parent, and I love my wife. It's not has nothing to do with her. Like, it's not that I don't see her less than my son. She's the mother of my children. She comes first. But you hold this sweet little baby that you literally created. She did the hard work, but created
Right.
together. And it just that the instant I saw him, everything, my entire life changed. And now with him, again, like, he comes through my little door in my office, and he just loses his marbles when he comes home from daycare. He sees me sitting here. He gets so excited, he starts pointing at all my trumpets, and he just wants to jump up on my lap, touch the keyboard, and hit all his there's no better feeling on earth. And so, um, I feel like I treat music differently than now because of those experiences, for sure. 100%. We have to live life. And the other thing I think too is, like, I did have some teachers that could be pretty brutal and mean. And looking back, I just don't see how that's helpful. You can have hard conversations and say, like, listen, if you want to go work in LA, you're going to have to put the work in. You're just not cutting it
Yeah.
right now. You can have these hard conversations without disrespecting the person. And I find that some people don't know how to do that. Now, there's a fine balance, because I also feel like sometimes teachers and students are just too soft. They can't handle the truth, and they just like we lie to children in order just to make them feel happy and safe, and then they graduate with a music degree and they can't get a job. It's because they're not good, you know. But I'm not gonna demean them as an individual. You know, that's the important thing. And so that I learned that too. Like, if you're not cutting it or it's not working out in lessons, like I'm gonna hold your feet to the fire, but I'm not gonna disrespect you as like a lesser person and spit on your shoes because you don't sound good. I mean, again, we're not curing cancer here.
Right.
Music, you know, I all of us trumpet players could disappear from the earth and the world will be just fine.
Hmm.
The world will turn without us just fine. And so I'm just grateful that we don't play like the sackbut or the ophicleide or all these like obsolete instruments. Maybe trumpet will be obsolete one day, I don't know. But for the time being, I'm glad that we are still able to make a living playing this trumpet. And so I think trying to walk through life with more grace and empathy, I think is just much you can find that balance between demanding a lot of yourself and your peers, but at the same time respecting the human value of everybody too. Because I feel like the music world can just sometimes can get pretty brutal, you know?
Yeah. And I 100% agree with you. I think, was it about a year ago or something, that there was a Facebook post, and I'm not going to go into the details of what it was or who posted it,
Yeah.
but just you probably know what I'm talking about. But just there was that discussion of, are we being too hard on students if we're trying to hold them
Oh,
accountable? You know what
yeah,
I'm talking?
yeah,
Well, maybe
yeah.
we'll talk about this off camera. But
Yeah.
the I just remember, like, I had a professor who was like kind of ripping into that person. He obviously he wasn't even the same. Uh, he was a different type of professor than the type of music this guy practiced,
Mhm.
and I just was thinking about that, and all the guy, and from my perception, was just like, he's like, you got to be taking care of yourself, and you can't be, BSing your way through life, and
Yeah,
there's that hard honesty that you have to have, but it has to be founded in compassion, you know,
exactly.
and and compassion for yourself, compassion for others, from a teacher standpoint, compassion for your students. And I think also the thing that you kind of alluded to this earlier, but the thing that that students really need to understand, and I would say any musician, especially those who are at like the beginning stages of their career, whether that's they're getting out of the music school and into the workforce, or at the beginning of music school, is like, you got, like, development is not going to come in that 4 year span. I would even say it may, and if it doesn't take 4 years, if it takes longer, that's fine too. It's like we put all
Well,
these
it's gonna take our whole life.
artificial, yeah, well, we put all these artificial boundaries on our timelines and deadlines
Yeah,
that can become really,
totally.
really toxic to our development. And it's just, yeah. I mean, you've already said it so eloquently.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
just,
you have to be intense when you're teaching, but if you're coming from the right place, your students will respect you. You know, Jay Saunders, who is quite possibly one of the greatest lead trumpet instructors of all time and professors from North Texas, and kinda like the Barbara and Charlie, if you know them, like, every person
yeah,
in an orchestra has
yeah,
studied with them except for a few. Well, there's 8 lead trumpet players in the military premier bands between the Jazz Ambassadors, Navy Commodores, Airmen and O, and us, the Army Blues. 6 of us all studied with Jay. There's only 2 guys that didn't. So we far outnumber them. Now Jay was really intense, but we loved him dearly like a granddaddy. And, like, one of the first times I finally got to play lead at North Texas, I go walking in his office, "Jay, how'd you think I sounded last night?" You know, and he's like, "All right, babes, come here, sit down, you know. You got a pen and paper?" I'm like, "Oh, jeez. Okay, it's over." And then he just hit me with everything. But it was because he cared and wanted to show me how to get to a better place to where I could be successful. It was never because of, like, beating over the head with a hammer because 'cause you're stupid and I can't believe you don't do
or
what I
to prove
say and
that
this
he
and
has
that.
an ear.
Yeah, it was always compassionate. So, like, if I'm grilling my student because they're lazy or showing up to work late or school or class, I'm like, "Listen, here's the deal. Like, if you did like, you're safe in school now, you're safe. If you do that in the real world, that's gonna happen exactly one time.
Yeah.
If you get a break on Broadway or a studio in LA and you show up late, that's it. It's over. It's
Yeah.
done. boom, door closed. Nobody's gonna be like, "Oh, I took a mental health day," and that's just not how it works. Now, once you can kinda prove yourself, then I find that there starts to become room for amnesty. If you've proved like, I think at this point, you never wanna guarantee anything, but I know that if I were to find myself a little late for a reasonable reason, like my kid's sick or something, or my wife was in a car accident recently, like, people I
Oh,
work for are not gonna fire me and never call me again. Like, the people I work for now are good people, they're good humans. It's not again, they're not like, well, you know
me first.
they
Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
understand. And so but you there's a period when you're working when you wanna get into the business, there's a period where you really have to prove yourself before you're never safe, but to where you start to develop a relationship and rapport. Like, there's contractors I know, and I have really good friendships. I can call them up about stuff, whatever. When I was new, it wasn't that way, and boy, oh boy, sometimes I'd show up to something like an hour and a half early, but I would much rather do that than be a minute late. Or even be on time. On time is late. You never wanna be in a place where, like, the contractor's wondering where you are 5 minutes before the downbeat. And
Right.
so, sometimes I can get really hard on my students for that, or the way they dress or their appearance, like, in a professional manner, and, like, but if you're doing it from a place of compassion, they will always respond positively because they know you're trying to help them be successful. Or even like they do something like that, I can give them experience like, "Hey, I did that too, and this is what happened to me." Jay would do that. Be like, "Listen, I know exactly how you feel. I did it, and this is what happened. So I don't want it to happen to you." And it was always a way to help. So you can be just as intense as like those old school teachers that are, like I'm a Catholic, you go to Catholic school and nuns smack you in the knuckles with a ruler or something. You can be as tough as that, but it doesn't have to be from a place of punishment or discipline. It could be good discipline, like this is how we just carry ourselves, not as like sit and time out kind of discipline. You know, so that's what I try to do in my teaching. I'll be brutally honest with my students, and I hold them accountable, but it's because I care, and if you wanna make it, that's the kind of discipline and regiment you have to hold yourself accountable for if if you wanna do this for a living.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things as we're kind of just coming to a close here, first of all, thank you for all of
Yeah,
your
man, thanks for
willingness
having
to
me.
share. Um, I have a couple of questions I like to ask at the end of every interview.
Okay.
The first one, this is actually a result of Jose's podcast, where I got in touch with somebody through his podcast as I was going through the beginning stages of my injuries to try and find some resources. And so if somebody were to come up to you and say, "Hey, Josh, I heard your story on Trust the Process with Clark, and I'm going through something myself," they could be like an oboe player, right? It doesn't have to be a
Sure.
trumpet player. Um, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give them?
You have to be willing to go slow. You have to go slow. I mean, when something like that happens, we wanna fix it right away, but sometimes the speed in trying to identify what in my instance, my injury took 2 years before I, like, really figured out identified what the issue was, and was able to come up with a plan to correct it. If you start rushing the process or you start moving too many pieces at once, you can end up worse than where you are now. And so I find that you have to be willing to pause, pause and slowly try to figure out what is the way forward. Have a plan, you know, and hopefully the people around you will give you the space to where there isn't pressure to say, well, okay, you got 1 month, you got 30 days to fix it. Hopefully, you have to give yourself self the space to heal. Cause like in my case, it might have taken 6 months for the injury to even manifest itself. So you're not going to fix it in 6 weeks. It's going to take 6 months, if not longer, you know? And,
Especially
and,
if it
and
was
so,
pedagogically like you learned
yeah,
something wrong,
could have been doing
so to
something,
speak.
could have been something you've been doing your whole life. And so I find that, yeah, go slow. You have to go slow and breathe. With that comes breathing. My wife is a licensed school counselor, And, like I said, I've dealt with all kinds of behavioral health things and anxiety and stuff, and I always just remember, smell the roses and blow out the candles. When I start getting anxious, like, you gotta do those breathing things and just go slow. Go slow. Everything will be okay, I promise. You're not the first person this has happened to, no matter the situation. You'll be fine. So,
Yeah.
that's
Well, and
kinda
if
what
I
I've
could,
learned.
yeah, if I could humbly add to that, I think that advice goes for, our students and musicians that feel like they have to learn everything right now, right?
Yeah,
That are on the path to injury because of that mindset. So anyway,
absolutely, yeah.
my last question, and you've alluded to this, I just love asking it, is if you could go back to Josh from college, and you had the opportunity to take away your injury experiences or leave them there, which would you choose and
I
why?
would leave them there,
And why is that?
100%, both of them. Um, I feel like if I didn't experience those myself, one of 2 things would happen, or well, a couple things. I don't think I would be nearly as smart of a player as I am now. I'm not smart like, "Oh, I know everything," but, like, being very attuned, like, in tune. I wish we could
Intentional.
do this again because I didn't even get to talk about, like, the whole neuromuscular system and why exactly that horn didn't work. We'll have to get together and do this again or something, have a
I'd be
part 2 or
curious. Yeah.
something. Yeah, like, my whole neuromuscular thing and why certain horns feel this way, that way, and how to identify all that stuff, but yeah, I've learned so much of that by being in the dumps. And if you're successful all the time, if everything comes easy to you, again, those are the worst players to teach. And I see it time and time again. Those are the ones that when something bad does go wrong, they're so lost. And so there's again, I try to just remember that the successes we have are founded in our failures. Every failure is a learning experience. And some failures are bad. Like, I don't know, life might be affected, but we can always learn and come out positively from an experience. And I don't feel like I would be nearly as good as a trumpet educator as I am, and I still have plenty of room to be great. I'm still probably not that great, but I feel like I have so many tools now, having actually experienced 2 different things firsthand to help my students, but then also help myself as I get older. I don't practice as much. I got a kid, I got a wife, I'm working all the time, but I have never had a single injury since those, and I'm playing better now than I ever have in my life. And if I didn't go through those experiences, I don't hey, buddy, it's my cat, Theo.
You're not the first
I don't
trumpet player to have a cat show up on the show.
yeah, I love my kitty. Um, I I would not be nearly as good of a it sounds weird, but if I didn't get injured, I would not be nearly as good of a trumpet player. I learned so much about my body and how the instrument works, how we learn to live in equilibrium. I tell my students how to be a trumpet player in alignment. Um Yeah, no, I would without question, I would keep those both injuries exactly where they were. I wouldn't change a thing. It sucked at the time, for sure, but again, I know what I know because of those experiences that I would not have learned if I didn't go through that. And I think that's the other thing to kinda piggyback to your first question is, um, when you find yourself in that situation, no, you have to be willing to just accept it as much as it might suck. And, people identify with music, they can't play, whatever injury they're going through, know that that situation will empower you. You're going to walk away better. You're going to learn a lot. You can empower yourself, you can empower others. And you're doing that now. I've never gone through dystonia, I've never gone through something, like, very serious, but by watching all your podcasts and stuff, I have learned so much, and I we have we should be grateful for, your not your experience, but out of that, everything you've learned and now what you're doing for other people, every single one of that us on some scale can do exactly the same thing. So,
Exactly.
yeah, no, I don't
Yeah.
I don't regret I would yeah, I would go through both of those things all over again, for sure.
Beautiful. Well, Josh, this has been a highlight of the show for me. I'm so grateful for your time and for your family's time that I'm definitely on borrowing for a little bit.
Well,
And
thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It means a lot. Again, I think so highly of you. You're such a good person, and obviously your podcast is like taking off, and you've got some really great interviews and extremely informative information. And I think if you don't know this already, I think it will, and it already is becoming a great resource for people, whether they're telling you or not. I know for me, I've already listened to a couple of the different podcasts like 3 times already because I live in
Really?
DC, so I spend a lot of time in my car
Yeah,
driving,
right.
trying to get home, whatever, and I've learned so much from a couple of the different podcasts, and, I really need to take the time to listen to all of them, but, congratulations to you for being willing to put in the effort to put this all together because of your own experience, and, yeah, again, I think for all of us in all of our different communities around the country and around the world, we can all do that for all the players around us because of all of
Absolutely.
our individual experiences, so I appreciate you, you know, letting me come on the show and having me and letting me, rant for a little while.
No, awesome. I've learned so much from you. Um, Not just in this hour, but obviously before as well. So
You're kind,
anyway,
man.
to everybody out there in podcast land, thanks for joining us. I hope you felt the care that we have for you and the hopes that we have that you can get through an injury if you're going through it, or just take this advice and run with it. I'm so excited to get this out to you guys. And if you want to send me a text, I'd love to hear from you. There's a link for that in the show notes. And if you want to support the show, there's an option for that as well. And until next time, keep on keeping on and keep trusting the process. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of Trust the Process, the official podcast of Musician Unchained, the newest coaching program dedicated to helping musicians navigate and overcome injury. But before you go, I have a few quick ways you can stay connected and support our growing community. First of all, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me a text with the link below and share your thoughts, questions, or just say hi. You can also check the show out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We also would love to see you in our Facebook support group, Trust the Process Podcast Injured Musician Support Group. If you found value in today's episode, consider making a donation to support our mission of empowering musicians worldwide. Every contribution helps us create more content and resources for you, so visit link number 2 below to support the mission. If you decide to donate, I'll send you my newest resource, the Injured Musician Toolkit, which is an ebook designed to give you tools to help you get through your injury. Subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive insights, tips, sneak previews of episodes, and announcements straight to your inbox. Act now and I will send you a free gift. So sign up at www.musicianunchained.com/newsletter. And if you or someone you know would like to go deeper with me in the topics of injury and mindset, head over back to musicianunchained.com and check out the Let's Hang tab. As always, I want to thank Daniel Baldwin, my audio engineer, and my sister Dana Lovell for her help with the promotional materials. There is no podcast without them. But before I go, I want to tell you how much I deeply appreciate your time and support. You are not alone on this journey. There are musicians and educators out there who need this resource, and we need to get it to them. Together, we are breaking the chain of old habits and thought patterns that don't serve us anymore, and unchaining the potential within ourselves to face each challenge with strength and resilience. So, as I always say, keep on keeping on and keep trusting the process. Until next time.